Next, moving on to presentations. Today we'll be hearing from Lynette Havlitzel with Ohio EPA with regard to their virtual inspections, which they've been doing in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we'll also be hearing from Amanda Gamby with the City of Bowling Green, who will be giving some local perspectives on those virtual inspections. So up first is Lynette, and she'll be presenting on what MS4s should expect from Ohio EPA virtual inspections.
All right, I am here, and can I share my screen?
Yes, Lynette, I gave you permission to share. If you look at the 4 buttons at the bottom of your screen, the second one from the left will allow you to share.
All right, the second one from my left is camera. So there's the share screen button that is X'd out on the right.
Yep, go ahead and click that. Mm-hmm. There, now it's working.
Are you seeing it? Okay.
You're in business.
We are visible, all is well. Are you seeing the chat box? Do I need to unpin those and move things?
No, we don't see the chat box. We just see PowerPoint.
Okay.
It doesn't look like it's in presentation mode yet. So if you put it in presentation mode, we'll be able to see just your slides.
There we go. We're in business. Okay. Well, I am Lynette Havlitzel. I'm with Ohio EPA's Northwest District Office. Ari had indicated that there were some questions about our virtual site visits. This is a new modality for us at Ohio EPA. So, I'd like to say that ever since March of 2013, we've been living in a slightly different world that I think is going to become a date that lives in infamy, but that was the date where Ohio EPA staff began to do remote work in response to the COVID pandemic. Even from that date onward, we still have staff that are doing field work. Our emergency responders are responding to releases and spills, and sometimes I've had their assistance in addressing certain complaints. They were my eyes and ears and virtually allowed me to be places that physically I could not be or probably should not be at this point in time. Also, we do have our staff that are going into the field and continuing to do monitoring of air quality and water quality. Those activities still are occurring. A little less frequent is the rest of us being out in the field. Working from home, we're still able to do pretty much everything that we were doing in the office, but we do miss those more routine compliance inspections that are part of our daily life. But back in the summer of 2020, we rolled out the virtual site visit process. So in many ways, this isn't different than how we did business before. Really, we contact the facility, and normally that's a phone call, introduce ourselves, say, we're interested in conducting a compliance inspection of your facility, and start working through the details and the logistics. We may require documents beforehand. So when you're in MS4, at this point, we normally have your annual reports to go by, but we might be asking to see site maps, or maybe for your erosion and sediment control, your construction runoff program, your post-construction stormwater management program. We might be requesting that you send us plans beforehand, maybe copies of some of your dry weather outfall screening documentation. So those kind of details will be explained during the phone call. That what elements are we going to be interested in looking at your facility? If I'm doing a construction site inspection, I'm going to briefly tell them I would like to see your stormwater pollution prevention plan, make arrangements to receive a copy of that. And for a construction site inspection, my interest is going to be looking at your sediment erosion controls, any kind of material storage on site, where the runoff is exiting the property, and the condition of your controls. So normally what I do is after we set up a time for a pre-meeting, maybe to discuss the details more in depth of what the inspection is going to look like. Sometimes we go right to actually scheduling the inspection itself. But either way, I normally will send an email summary of the conversation, just reiterating what the purpose of the inspection is. And at this point, Ohio EPA is not able, most of us are not able to receive a phone call directly. So our communication method is through an online meeting application. In our case, we normally use Microsoft Teams. So it functions pretty similar to GoToMeeting. There's some slight differences in the software and the setup, but the functionality is pretty much identical. So if we agree to do a pre-meeting to kind of get a little more organized, if it's a larger facility, and there's might be some documents, I might want the SWIP, I might want some of that other documentation to look at to more fine-tune the actual inspection. We set the pre-meeting. How EPA sends a scheduler out with a web link on it. That at the appointed date and time, we can all click on and join together, much like today. And it gives people an opportunity to test the equipment they're going to be using, whether it's an iPad, their cell phone, a laptop, you name it. We've done this with a variety of technologies, and each one's a little different. Usually in the pre-meeting, we're discussing who's going to be the facility representative, who's the cameraman, who's going to walk around and give us the pan shots, the close-ups, and really it starts to sound a little Hollywoodish sometimes during the inspections. He's like, can you pan, to your left? Can you pan to your right? Can you tilt it a couple degrees down? But we established during a pre-meeting who's going to be that contact person, who's going to be present to answer questions and review what the actual physical part of the inspection is going to look like. Now, when you're an MS4 and we do an MS4 VSV, the physical part of the inspection would be if we were going to do a construction site inspection with the MS4. And in that case, the MS4 would be the one, we'll pick on Kevin today. So Kevin, I'm going to do a Wood County inspection. We're going to say you're going to be the guy that's the facility rep. We're going to do your construction program. We're going to go out to a construction site. You're the cameraman, and you're going to run through your inspection like you would normally do a construction site inspection. And I'm just tagging along. I'm going to see what you see. I'm going to, hear your thoughts as to what items, as you're going through your inspection checklist, what deficiencies are you seeing? What items did you note previously that you're seeing have been corrected since your last inspection? I'm basically going to kind of be that little person on your shoulder eavesdropping to your thought process as you go through that inspection, do a normal routine inspection for your MS4. And I would be taking notes during this point in time to discuss with you later. So, but if it was a construction site, if it's an industrial site, very similar process. The physical part though for the MS4 is normally limited to the construction site inspections, maybe some of the illicit discharge, detection, elimination, NCMs, maybe working through a spill complaint with the MS4, also the P2. We have had some of our inspectors do the pollution prevention for municipal operations as a VSV. And again, that would be the MS4 going through, say, the maintenance facility, looking at where's the fueling areas, where's the fuel storage, where's your used oil storage, where are the catch basins outside, where's the outfalls, what does the outside of the maintenance facility look like, taking notes, probably getting a copy of that municipal facility SWIP beforehand to walk along with the inspector and make sure that we are covering all the possible areas of pollution prevention or pollutants would be present, the best management practices that are employed, are those in place, and we would use a site map to help guide us and the facility on the inspection. So those kind of details do get discussed during this pre-meeting. We set up a time and date for the actual inspection. And again, that link and email goes out to anybody who wishes to participate. And at the appointed time and date, we all connect. And much like this meeting, we usually have conversations because we are dealing with a lot of people who this is a new way of life for them to do a virtual site visit. So, we're going to want to review with our facilities the limitations of the technology. What happens when you walk out to the dumpster and you lose internet connection or cell connection? How do we pick up that inspection again? Normally, the advice is, and we set this before we start an inspection, go back to the last place that we had connection and we'll pick it up from there. Little details like turning the microphone off, turn your camera off when you're not moving, or when you're moving from one point in a facility to another to preserve battery, as well as, to prevent people from getting motion sickness. Although I think Stefan can concur on this, that we're good at this point about looking away at certain times, so that bounciness of the camera doesn't unsettle us too much anymore. And really this becomes a much more, collaborative process to do an inspection, because you as the entity end up being our eyes and ears. And but so far I think it's working fairly well. Obviously we can't smell anything. There's no odor vision or scent vision in this process. So if there was like a septic outfall, and I was doing an illicit discharge detection elimination inspection with an MS4, I kind of need to ask questions about, well, is it sulfur smelling? Does it smell like shampoo? And get that feedback. But visually, I think we can get a lot of information through this virtual site visit process. Other than that, with the MS4, when we're doing an inspection or an audit, we're still using questions from US EPA's guidance manual on doing an audit of an MS4. So you might see the questionnaire beforehand to prep yourselves or to help have you prep and have a response. And we would just do the interview portion online via phone call. So that part hasn't changed, but the VSV process has slightly altered that in-person component of some of our inspections. So, and normally once we get through all the questions, we take screenshots sometimes during the VSV process. There is usually a closing interview towards the end of, hey, this is what I've seen. Here's some areas we think you can improve upon. Or, we really have an item here that is of concern to us. We'll be, following that up with a letter. There may be a request at the end for some additional documentation from the facility that we would ask be emailed to us. Right now, again, we have limited staff in the office due to COVID and the precautions that we are taking. So we really need any documentation to be sent electronically to Ohio EPA. And you can do it via email. We do have a, I think it's a 24 meg limit on our email attachments. So if it's larger than that, we also have something called liquid files, which is like Dropbox, that we send those links to the facility, and they can upload plant and sets and things to that we can then have access to and look at. So, you know, you might be wondering, what does a virtual site visit look like? So I included a couple screenshots to give you an idea. This is not a virtual site visit, although you might think it is. This is Lynette sitting in her home watching the street sweeper go by. So we, you know, internally we have a few jokes about Lynette, and you know, every month I see the street sweeper go by, and unfortunately, or fortunately for the MS4 I live in, they're not regulated. So I'm not monitoring their pollution prevention practices here. It's just a professional interest of mine to see them cruise by every so often and getting the stuff out of the curbs and the gutters so it doesn't go into the storm sewer system. But this picture, this is my screenshot. So in this case, I'm doing a construction site inspection in Auglaize County. And I have received the SWIP beforehand. I obtained that during the pre-meeting. I have it up on my screen while we're doing the inspection, so I can kind of make sure I'm covering all the areas that I want to see, all the important parts of the project, what are the BMPs, and you know, I might also pull up a little aerial map to help me visualize things as well. But you know, this went very well. I thought it was really easy for me to pick up on, hey, the silt fence is down here. Hey, you know, it doesn't look like it's entrenched over there. And I would tell the on-site person, can you swing to the left? Can you approach that silt fence? Can you lift the bottom of that fabric up? And that was how we proceeded to, you know, walk through this project and do the inspection. This is in the city of Wapakoneta. I was doing an inspection with the city staff of a road project. You know, again, you know, site was stabilized. That was great. They had inlet protection in. And, you know, I had my site map to keep track of where we were at and which BMPs I wanted to look at. And I was also able to say, okay, you're almost done with construction. So what's your post-construction BMP? How are you guys managing to meet that permit requirement, and have a good conversation with them about compliance with that item in the permit. This is another construction site inspection, my screenshot. This was out in Fulton County. And this one was nice because which is not a frequent thing, but they had drone footage, which they gave to me beforehand. So I was really pleasantly surprised at how much information I could glean from the drone footage. Just like 4 or 5 aerial photos. And so before the inspection happened and during the pre-meeting, I was going, okay, I want to look at this area over on the left. I don't see any kind of sediment control there. What was that area? What did you guys do there? Have you since put something in place? Let's go look at that during the inspection. And on the right side, it's a line of silt fence. And mind you, this is like a 55-acre project we're looking at. So I could sit there and look at the drone footage and see that, hey, the silt fence came off the stake. That's an area that needs to be fixed. This I thought was interesting. So the sun is at an angle, and I could look at a line of silt fence. And, you know, really, since the sun's at an angle, the shadow behind the silt fence should be pretty consistent. And there were a couple areas where you could see there was a notch in the shadow. So I could talk to the on-site people and say, you know, it looks like maybe the fabric is down in this location. Can we go check that out? This is another facility. Again, this is our view when we're doing a virtual site visit. Normally I have my SWIP available to look at. And in this case, we're walking towards the front to start at that construction entrance to evaluate sediment tracking and work our way through the site from there. And this last one, we're also doing this at industrial sites. So it's really important for us, and you can tell when some of the photo quality isn't always the best. But if people do stay still for a minute, not even a minute, a couple seconds, it brings the picture into focus, and we do get better photos than maybe some of the ones that I've captured and put up here. But again, I can still go through and go, okay, well, I have this dark staining on the pavement. Let's go take a look at this. What is this area? You know, what are your best management practices for this? Did you have a spill? In this case, you probably have some dust coming off a dust collector, and that needs better housekeeping in this area. But basically, you know, you kind of get the gist that, you know, we're doing the virtual site visits now. Much of the process is still the same as how we would do a traditional site visit. You know, we're utilizing new technology, but so far it's worked, you know, fairly decent for us to do routine compliance checks. Now, in the event that we get to a place, which thankfully I've not had that experience so far, but if we got to a facility that was like, wow, we really have some serious large scale problems, and don't seem to be able to move them towards compliance, we do have the ability to go to the director and in our management team and say, we really feel this site warrants that in-person inspection. And at this point, you know, that's kind of our process, is for places that are in significant non-compliance, sites that are really large and we feel would not be suitable for a virtual site visit, we do go to our management team and say, we feel this one's a candidate for us to be in person. We're not gonna be able to get the information we need during doing the virtual site visit. And they will evaluate those situations. And so we do still have people who then will go out and do the in-person inspection, but, you know, in consideration of COVID and the current rates of infection, we are doing most of our more routine compliance checks using this modality. Any questions?
Lynette, will the virtual inspections be recorded?
No, we will not record them, and we are told to inform the facility that they should not be recording on their end either. I think the reason behind that probably becomes there's some legal issues with that. So we will take pictures. We may ask the facility to take a picture and then send that to us, but it will not be recorded.
Thank you.
Lynette, this is Kari. Are these inspections being done sort of as a first look to see what needs further follow-up? Or does the agency actually have the legal authority to issue notice of violations based on a virtual inspection? Or is that not laid out in the code at this time?
We can issue a notice of violation based on the information gleaned in the inspection. I think, you know, what's going to factor into that is, you know, the documentation we have. What do we see? How good is our information? I had an inspection of an industry, which is really, they had a no exposure certification. It was simply a confirmation that they had no exposure of activities or materials outside. That was all I was checking on. And unfortunately, and I would have thought this was a logistics company, a large nationwide company. And I did not anticipate that once I got 5 feet outside the building, whenever they moved more than that, they dropped their connection. You know, so sometimes, you know, sometimes the view that I could get with their connectivity was not the greatest. And I had asked them, in certain areas to, you know, can you send me, I can see from a distance, but I'd like something a little closer with a little more detail in the photo. Please take a picture and send it to me. But in their case, you know, they had stuff outside, and so they were not eligible for the no exposure certification. So I can make that kind of a call. There are times with like the construction general permit. So I've had a few facilities that had not stabilized the ground, and it, you know, clearly evident they hadn't. So, you know, we had a conversation about, well, when's the last time that you worked this? Well, we worked it back in October. So what's your plan for stabilization? Well, you know, it's not really a good time of year. So we were thinking, you know, we're going to wait until March, and we're going to do a little more earthwork then, and then we're going to seed it. And it's like, well, the permit requirement is if anything's going to sit idle for 14 days or more, some kind of cover's got to be put on that soil within the first 7. So between their documentation, the verbal conversation, and, you know, obviously the pictures and what I could see from the video, that was a violation. So we can issue them a notice of violation letter.
Lynette, this is Kevin again. How many of these have you performed, and whether or not you could give an answer to this question, you know, do you feel they've been successful?
I've done 4 industrials, 1 MS4, and I'm trying to think. I'm thinking probably like 10 construction sites, but I've also had several. A lot of my time in the past year has been spent on existing enforcement cases and court commitments, things like that. So I've not done as much on the inspections as I would normally this past year.
Okay, and just quick follow-up, has compliance really been an issue? Or are you finding folks responsive to this, or have you guys had a hard time kind of getting people on board?
I'd say so far a lot of people have been very adventurous, and they're like, oh, okay, well, we'll do this. And it's been kind of fun from the perspective of we have people who this is not their way of life. They do not, you know, other than maybe filling their time cards and some, you know, their normal record keeping on a computer, they're not real, you know, tech savants. So having the conversations about, okay, everyone needs to be muted. Okay, we're having a problem with the picture freezing, so everybody needs to shut down their video. And then they tend to forget because they're so engrossed in doing their part of the inspection. You know, they leave stuff on as they're walking along. It's been interesting and an education, I think, for all of us. I've heard 1 or 2 stories from coworkers about people who said they would not agree to participate in this method. And I'm not sure where that went. I think probably if we have known noncompliance, if you're in significant noncompliance, if we have a complaint, that's probably when we start having a conversation with our management about showing up personally. But, you know, for the most part, you know, we're doing compliance checks. So I think it's been good in that respect. Like I said, obviously, you know, I can't smell anything, so I don't have that to help cue me into, is there a different problem? Do I need to look in a different direction or have them go in a different direction? And sometimes, you know, depending on the quality of the video, you know, it gets a little tough to tell, you know, doing an inspection on a cloudy day, is it stone on the ground or are those really fine metal chips? So yeah, sometimes you can kind of glean some of that information. You know, can you move the camera in closer? You know, obviously if there's a discharge that we're looking at, can you do a great job telling the amount of turbidity is in the water column? Depending on lighting, that might be a little bit of a challenge. But we do still get a lot of information this way.
All righty.
Well, thank you.
All righty. Moving on, we'll have Amanda Gamby of the City of Bowling Green show us what it's like being on the other end of the camera, other side of the camera.
Thanks, Kevin. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes, we were contacted back in October and asked if we would be interested in working through these virtual site inspections. Of course, it was a relatively new format for the EPA themselves. Brad and I are both, our engineer and I are both relatively new still to the stormwater, just ins and outs, and had never really gone through this process with the EPA. Initially, we were under the kind of the impression that these were going to be like just inspections of active construction sites that we had going on within the City of Bowling Green. Initially, it was proposed that we would kind of be the boots on the ground for about 6 different sites. And we really only had 3 that were active. So yes, we did have the pre-meeting where we went over some of the virtual considerations, confirmed the 3 sites that we would be attending. We do have 2 inspectors here on staff that typically do our inspections of all of these sites, not just stormwater related, but anything that we require as well. So we had them engaged and involved during this process. Where it got to be a bit confusing is, you know, on the day of, it turned from not just inspections of the site, but then there was also follow up with us and questions of our MS4 program. And it really turned into what, after listening to Lynette, seems almost like a mishmash of following our MS4 and our inspectors and how they inspect and how we have our program set up, and then also doing those construction inspections. I will say we were given the permission to contact the sites in advance so that it wasn't completely weird us showing up with phones and cameras, you know, on an active construction site. I could see any manager of a site being a little put off by that. So, you know, if you'd prefer, you know, to show up to your sites unannounced, you know, obviously using this method, you are providing a bit of an advantage to those folks because they know you're coming and they have a few days to prepare, I guess. So if you'd prefer to show up unannounced, this really is not the method for that. The EPA inspector actually did all of the inspections. So we were, I guess now I'm a bit confused on if our inspector should have done those and maybe the EPA just listened in and gave us some feedback. We can kind of follow up after this, but so our inspector did the inspections. I ended up using my personal cell phone. The work phones that we have do not have the battery life to accommodate this length of I mean, you're on a video, you're in a format like we're on today, but you're in the field. So you need to make sure you're using something that has an unlimited data plan, something that has a battery life that can withstand a long duration of being engaged on a video format. And it took about a half a day to get through 3 sites. And I would say by the end of the 3rd site, I did have to shut the phone off, you hit or miss towards the end just to be able to hold my battery long enough to complete it. So that was one big consideration that we wanted to make sure to pass along, that you'll probably need multiple devices and chargers. If we would have done all 6 sites in one day, we may not have had the equipment to be able to finish all of those. Or we would have had to have taken a break and allowed our equipment to charge, those kinds of things. And I don't know if anybody has policies on using their own personal devices versus, not for these types of work activities. So that would be another consideration as well. At the actual sites, this was the part that we were a little bit put off by. I will say our supervisors were extremely put off by it when we reported back. Of course, everyone understands the constraints that we're under with COVID, and God bless anybody who's been working from home since last March, because we're going on a year of that, and I don't know how you're all surviving. I would be completely crazy. So we're certainly, all for moving things forward. However, it ultimately relies on folks who are in the field, which I think Lynette kind of alluded to, and it does rely on those folks who are more, putting themselves in potentially harm's way to be able to accommodate these virtual visits. When we arrived at the site, we were pretty much inundated at every site with a minimum of 3 construction managers and or site managers in some shape or form, because they knew that we were coming and we knew that the EPA was on the other side of that phone. So it was very difficult to maintain any kind of safe distance. It's a very small screen, so folks were ultimately passing around one device, to each other, trying to lean in to hear, and you're trying to step back and hold out the phone. So if these are being done under the guise that we're trying not to bring folks together and, the safety of COVID and those considerations, we put at least 4 city employees and a handful of every single construction site employees in harm's way on those days, potentially exposing, upwards of 30 people, I would estimate in one day. We pushed back a little. We asked for in-person visits. We felt it would be much safer if we were in the field with masks on and a minimum of 6 feet apart. But it's our understanding that the governor and the top level supervision is very, very much against that type of field work at this time. But after going through it and reporting back to our supervisors, I think it would be very difficult for us to get the permission to agree to this type of format in the current COVID climate that we're in, based on what we know and the experience that we had in terms of the exposure to other people. As far as really what the ultimate result was, yes, they can issue notices of violation. One of our sites did receive a notice of violation immediately following the inspections. I think every site we went to received some type of letter that included recommendations for some type of improvement, whether it be minor, like a dumpster cover or something like that. They all received some form of documentation. When we returned to the office, we then went through another hour or so of questions that pertained strictly to our MS4, which then started, maybe putting on the light bulbs that we were getting that portion of our plan audited. So had we realized that sooner, we would have had more people in the room. The way our plan is set up is we have multiple folks across different departments that work on different sections of this plan. And we found ourselves really unable to adequately answer some of those questions, and thought we could have been a bit, we could have presented ourselves a bit better if those other folks would have had the virtual meeting on their calendar and could have participated as well. So I guess the biggest piece of advice I would say is just know that there's a good chance you are going to be exposed to a good number of people in terms of doing these. So if you do have very strict COVID policies yourself, I really encourage you to to have a good talk with your supervisors and have a good talk with the EPA on how to mitigate that the best that you can. Also, make sure that, like I said, you have an unlimited data plan and a good healthy battery life or multiple devices to take with you. And then I would ask for clarification right up front on what the intent of the day is and how the day is going to unfold and what all is being reviewed, because we did not realize the full extent of what our day had in store for us. And again, I would say, I don't know if this is something the EPA is considering even after COVID. I mean, certainly from a sustainability standpoint, I'm sure it'd be, a great way to mitigate transportation, especially if you're coming, to a site that's 2 hours away or something. But I know here, just with the internal conversations we've all had, we really do not prefer this method. We prefer in-person, the true field visits. Obviously, once we get past COVID, our preference would be to do away with these inspections and to go back to the in-person method that was in place beforehand. So I hope that wasn't too harsh. Don't be too mean to us, EPA. We do share a community with you, and we certainly appreciate all your efforts despite all the constraints that you're all under. But it just really wasn't, the format for us in our community. So I'm happy to answer questions.
Hey, Amanda, this is Lynette. Would it have been helpful, just going forward and an opportunity for making this better? Would it have been helpful for you if we had also shared the link with the on-site construction manager so that they could have tied in separately? And that way you wouldn't have been passing a phone back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, that would be one alternative. I mean, we did have, I think every site, it would end up being, 3 or 4 people huddled around a phone trying to listen, and, it's loud on a construction site, so they'd be leaning in, or then they'd be leaning in to talk, or, so yeah, if they had it on all of their devices and were willing, I think that's the key. Unless you have an unlimited data plan, are you really going to be willing to spend your money, or, so I think that's really the key, if they can accommodate it. But that would have certainly helped, yes, to do that.
And would it be better if it was communicated to the construction entity? You guys get one rep. Whoever it is, you pick it, but you get one, because we can't have everybody congested.
Sure, yeah. That would be a consideration too. I mean, that could be something when you reach out, a couple of days beforehand, giving them the heads up, you could maybe make that as one of the guidelines. I mean, unfortunately, we kind of found that it was different people dealing with different aspects, especially on some of the bigger sites. So, even if we had a dominant person, they'd say, oh, we actually need to go back to the trailer and talk to so-and-so. He handles that. And then some guy would bring out a binder, and then we'd have to hold the phone over the binder to try to show what was in there. And
okay,
it was just all kind of silly.
But that wouldn't have been something that you guys normally do during inspection in the COVID world. I mean, obviously prior to 2020, we all would have gathered in the construction trailer, but since then, that's not how your inspectors normally do business.
No, I mean, they go to the sites independently, and they do their inspection. If they interact with someone for whatever reason, I mean, they just keep their distance. I mean, our employees are all wearing masks, and it's just handled a little bit more on the down low. And that's what we kept saying, like an EPA inspector could show up on this site. You could almost just give a heads up that you were coming and tell them you don't want to be approached, do your inspection, and call if you had follow-up questions, and it would be a lot safer than what we did that day.
Okay. I hear you, and I think you have some really good points about things we need to think about upfront and communicate upfront in order to address. I think a lot of People are still very much in the habit of doing business the way they normally do business. Unless we stand up and say, no, we need to execute this a little differently, and here's how it's going to go forward. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's just, I found this too when I was working from home. I mean, you are ultimately reliant on someone who is a boots on the ground person. And while it's great that all the state employees are tucked away safely, and I understand the governor's reasonings for that, in order to pull off these inspections, I think our supervisors wanted it recognized that you're still putting other employees in harm's way by making these types of requests, if that makes sense. So they were not real happy to hear about this format at all, with just some of their concerns with our exposure. So.
Lynette, do you know if Ohio EPA intends to continue the virtual inspections going forward, or is this just a COVID world situation for now?
Well, it's definitely in response to COVID world. I mean, occasionally we would do similar approaches when we had, spills, releases. We in our district, it covers 24 counties. So if something comes up, somebody gives me a call and says, the stream is black. Obviously, I can't make the 3-hour drive to Ashland immediately and see it. So sometimes we would have these kinds of approaches where somebody nearby, the complainant, your local emergency responders would give us this kind of a, hey, let me bring it up on my phone and we'll get together and have a confab. So it has happened prior to COVID in a limited scale. It's a much broader scale, much wider application. Don't know how we're going to do this going forward. I don't think this is going to be our sole approach to things. But is there more of an opportunity to use it in the future? Possibly. It's hard to say. I think for all of us right now, what the near term future and our mobility is going to look like.
Any more questions for Lynette or Amanda? Alrighty, thanks Lynette, thanks Amanda for coming to talk to us. And moving on to the next agenda item, we have Sarah Geyer with TMACOG giving us our Clear Choices Clean Water Program update.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all in the new year. Well, I see 3 people right now. I have had my camera off. We've had our General Assembly going on all week, and for whatever reason, my Wi-Fi is just terrible this week, so I've been also off camera most of the time since that helps a lot. But yeah, glad to be here today. I didn't say anything at the beginning because I won't lie, I got pretty emotional. But I did just want to say that we will really miss Joy. And I tried to tell her as often as I could, thank you for everything that she did and how awesome she was. And I truly hope that she knew that. I hope that she knew how appreciated she was. So, and I will try to make this a nice short and sweet update here. Starting out with a familiar picture for Kari. I couldn't resist. I was going through our local photos for Clear Choices that we've used for the website over the years, and this one was really cute. So Kari and Isabella, they're kayaking. So All
She
right.
was much littler then. She's almost as big as me now.
No, she looks tiny. All right, so just to give kind of an overview, I'm sure that most, if not all of you, are familiar with Clear Choices Clean Water. It's a web-based campaign that we use in education and outreach efforts. Obviously, this past year, like with everything else, has been a lot different. We used to be able to go to events and share some more of this information. So I'll talk a little bit about different things that we've done and plan to do. I did want to point out that we now have 6 focus areas. So one of the components of this update is the release of a new website. So the website has been updated and it actually went live this morning. So it's the same URL. If you went to it in the past, I think day or two, or maybe a few days, I don't know exactly when they made the switch, but it would have said under construction. I did not realize that I had to change it from that. So that is changed now and it is active for the new site. But when they added the new site, they added a new focus area, which is waterfowl management. And they said that it was easier for them to just add it with everyone's affiliate site. So we did get that 6th content area at no charge, and it won't be any charge moving forward. So we'll still just have the 5 content areas. It was just easier for them logistically to keep it in there. So I did check. The pledge for waterfowl management is not to hunt Canada geese, because I would really like to take that pledge, but it gives some tips on deterring waterfowl if you have water features near your home, because they can really affect water quality. So check it out, see what you think of the new content. So the way that we've been using the program, again, you're probably all familiar with this. We update the website monthly. We have different focus areas for each month. So we try to keep that kind of fresh with the theme. That is not going to be a thing on the new website as far as the homepage, but we're going to see how we can do that. The homepage has a little bit different format now. Posting on social media, we have Twitter and Facebook. We've added events, so if partners have events, we did have a calendar of events on the old website. That is not a feature on this new website, and it didn't seem to be utilized all that often. So we do try to just share through the social media now. And then partner events, hopefully we'll get back to that this year. I know that we've had some different things where people use some of the materials. I just had Wood County Parks reach out for some pet poo information, because with more people in the parks, they've been bringing more pets. And so that is definitely something that they need to address right now. So anything like that, we can still help out with, even though we can't do those big in-person events. And then the website, we had just made, well, Barbie made some additions as far as saltwater pools and properly draining those, and then also pesticides under the native plants area. All right, and then like I said, since things changed due to COVID, and then also just the program being around for a few years, you know, you try to think of different ways to utilize it and to make it kind of newer or appeal to your current audience or bring new people in. So we did have a working group meeting in August, and it was a really great discussion of, I don't know, about 8 people, I think. And we talked about different ways that we could update it a little bit. So we talked about the website, social media, different things that we can do. We did realize that a lot of us who are involved with this right now don't know very much about, you know, current things for social media. So that's something that will take some more effort. Anything that we could do in person, and then how to encourage new pledges. All right, and Barbie was so kind, and she made this slideshow originally, and she said what we've done so far, but that is certainly not true. She really took the lead on this and made everything happen while she was here. So she did a great job with this. But so we changed the themes. You'll see that there are some that repeat just with the number of focus areas that we have that's necessary with 12 months. We do have the waterfowl that has been added since these were changed. So I'll go ahead and take a look at that and see where we can put that in here and have that be a focus since we have it available now. But yeah, Barbie just made some changes after talking to the working group to make these line up a little bit better with the year. And then another awesome thing that Barbie set up was scheduled social media posts. So she made sure that first Monday and third Wednesday of each month, she has scheduled posts, and she did. Kari, did you send out the schedule for that already?
Yes, that should have gone out, I believe, both in October and December
Okay.
to all members.
Okay, thanks. All right, I thought that had been sent out. So if you don't have it, you can go ahead and reach out to me and I can send that out to you. And again, those posts will be related to the theme for each month. City of Toledo, it was actually their idea, and it was a great idea that has worked out well. That way all of you can plan ahead, and if you have something that lines up with an event you're doing or some focus that you have for that month, that should work out for all of you. And then, sorry, my screen is, so as far as advertising, sorry, I'm lost here. We updated the advertising for social media. So we have new graphics that we can use to share. We were using a little bit older graphics and not very updated. So Barbie made a bunch of new graphics and informational pieces that we can use for social media. And I can also share those if you would like. All right, so in the future, so this is some of the stuff that the working group talked about. We would love to have large group events again, so things like bingo cards, scavenger hunts, something to make it a little bit more interactive and bring more people in. Would be a great thing for in person. We've talked to people who their organizations might like to use this with their employees, so they might want to incentivize for their employees to participate by improving water quality. Not our already partner and sponsor organizations, but other organizations in the area who are interested in using this. So that's something that could develop. We talked about mini pledge drives, so certainly you could do that at events. We've had some great success with schools in the past. So if we can encourage more teachers to incorporate Clear Choices materials, that could boost their teaching and then also get more people involved with the program. Virtual outreach events. So if we have had any events in this past year where it was relevant, we've mentioned Clear Choices, and we can do that. You can do that at any of your events. And we'll try to keep that going since virtual will probably keep going for quite a while. Partners talked about having grab and go materials. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can reach out to me. We have the postcards and other materials that a lot of us have ordered in the past and still have some of those. So we can talk about ways to use that if you do have any in-person events or if you'd want to leave them at library, your office, or anything like that. And then new on the new website, we have local campaigns. So you can set up a very specific campaign. Partners or sponsors can utilize this for free. The main office for Clear Choices, they would they encouraged us very strongly to charge if there are outside groups, like organizations, companies that would want to set up something specific to them, just because it will take some staff time and some resources that we don't want to take away from our sponsors and our group. So I hadn't really thought about that, but I think that's a good thing for them to have mentioned, and we can definitely talk about that. My dog's gonna start barking, just a moment. Okay. All right, so we can talk about how to do that. We'll have another advisory group meeting here in the spring. More stuff that the group talked about, so just so you all know about this and we can try to use it if it's appropriate. Social media challenges. So I know a few organizations during COVID, especially during when everything was locked down, did bingo or scavenger hunts in parks or in other areas. And so we could look at stuff like that, and then just continue editing the website. So take a look at the website, the new website. We went through and edited a bunch already. So it should be updated with all of our local information, but we can always, keep refining that and adding anything that we think is missing. We do want to find a way to feature partners and sponsors. So again, with this new website, we'll have to look into it. I would know exactly how to do it on the old one, but we'll see where we have the opportunity. All right, and then just really quickly, some of the stats. So this is September 2018 to 19, and then 2019 to 2020. That's what all the graphs are for. So website sessions and users both went up. User is just anyone who shows up to the website, and then sessions are people who interacted a little bit longer with the website. So those both went up going into 2020. Pledges really went down. So one of the reasons that the Clear Choices organization decided to update the website is because they just thought it was time for kind of an overhaul of the whole program. They in the Indiana, so the original location, and then all of the other affiliate sites, including us, have all seen a very similar drop in pledges. Probably because we reached most of the people that we are going to reach with our current efforts and our current methods that are going to take pledges, because people don't necessarily go back and take the pledge over and over again. So pledges, we're glad that the website usage went up, definitely, because the pledges were concerning, but we're hoping that with the new website and new pledge options that we can increase that. And then social media, again, social media did go down. Twitter, as far as impressions, I guess we're really, really high because of a couple of outliers that accounted for the large majority of our impressions for the first part of this graph here. So probably wasn't as much of a drop as it shows, but again, it has gone down on both Twitter and Facebook. Part of that is I think that we were a little bit more active as far as sharing a lot of content. We did drop down a little bit in early 2020 to mid 2020. So I think that has picked back up. And then all of you, if you can, with your organizations, make sure that you're sharing that so we keep those posts going. All right, and that is all I have. If anyone has any questions, can let me know. I know that we have been on here for a while, so you can definitely email me if you have anything that you'd like to talk about.